Hi everyone, I'm Shelly and you're watching There's No Place Like Home. Today I wanted to approach a familiar topic that I've dealt with from time to time, which is the dismantling of the family. But I wanted to talk about it from a different point of view. So today's video is about the subversion of the family. Let's talk about fathers. So not too long ago, someone had actually commented asking me if I had ever created a video approaching the idea of the dismantling of the family in the perspective of fathers, because I always do seem to focus more on mothers, because being a mother myself, that is the way that I see things. I usually talk about, compulsory schooling. It kind of ripped the family apart, a family that was once together. And then I move on to women's lib and how it took mothers out of the homes and away from their children. And so I'm going to touch on that a little bit today, but I'm going to touch on that only to complement what I'm going to be addressing regarding fathers today. Because you know what? The whole process of compulsory schooling through women's liberation, through what we have going on now, has had a huge effect on fatherhood. And it has had a very negative effect on fatherhood. And it's something that I can't believe that I didn't even think to address before. And that is my own fault. Again, I was so focused on talking about mothers all the time that I completely missed the huge importance of what happened to dads, to fathers. So yeah, let's go back to pre-compulsory schooling. Pre-compulsory schooling, pre-industrial revolution, families were typically together. Fathers might have been out of the house, maybe working on the fields or whatever it is that they do throughout the day, but it wasn't like it is today, where a dad leaves and goes to his work, at a business or somewhere else, and then he comes home after 8 hours and then they eat dinner. It was nothing like that. The family was still central at that time, and a lot of times the children themselves, especially the boys, were helping their fathers with whatever jobs that it was that they had to do. And in fact, it wasn't just the sons that were helping. The wives were helping. The girls were helping. It was a family enterprise, because a lot of these families at this point were still homesteading. And so these children had the mentoring of both mothers and fathers during this time. Unfortunately, though, once the Industrial Revolution got started, a lot of fathers were taken out of their homes and they started working, not taken like forcibly. I don't want to make it sound like that, but they made it sound appealing to them. So they started working in these factories away from their homes. And then the children themselves got taken out of their homes to be placed in these schools. And while I can't really say forcibly, it was by law. So if you want to look at it that way, maybe you could say by force. But these kids were then taken away from their families. They were placed in these schools each day. And so what happened was the dismantling of the family began there, because what was once a very central figure of the family working together to be self-sustaining, that was kind of ripped apart. And not only were these kids not learning the skills that prior generations had learned so that they could be independent, they were also losing a very important aspect of being at home, and that was having the mentorship, the guidance of both parents. And yes, kids need their fathers, and I don't think that enough importance is placed on that today. So moving on, then we have the women's liberation movement. And one thing that I want to point out to you is that Industrial Revolution, compulsory schooling, and women's lib all had the Rockefeller family behind them. And that is not by accident. This was planned, and I've mentioned in other videos that one of the whole reasons for the compulsory schooling and for women's lib was to kind of dissolve the family. They just wanted this utopian society, this idea that one day children would no longer be living with their parents, the whole Brave New World scenario. And I've talked about that in several other videos. But women's lib didn't just affect women. It didn't just affect children. it affected fathers too. Because what Women's Lib did was, since compulsory schooling provided the daycare that mothers needed for their children, because at this point in time, by the time that Women's Lib started, it was normal for the mother to be home and for the father to be out working, which was different. It was a different setup than what it had been pre-compulsory schooling, but the child at least still had one parent home with them. It was usually not the father, it was usually the mother. But what Women's Lib did was it provoked women into wanting to kind of step outside of the home and to not provide that maternal role that so many children need in the home. And it also provided them a way to start looking at their husbands as disposable. A lot of these mothers, they got a sense of freedom. They got a sense of freedom from having to look after their children. And they were told that being at home was a bad thing. Being at home was akin to slavery. And a lot of women, unfortunately, believed this. And so the divorce rate skyrocketed during this point because, again, women started to believe that they did not need their husband. They had free daycare in the school system. They were able to work. They were able to earn a living. And it is not a coincidence. Now, Women's Lib happened in the 1960s, late 1960s. It is not a coincidence that also in the 1960s, for the first time, people who were not elderly or disabled were eligible to collect welfare. So think about that. So prior to that, the only people who were able to collect welfare benefits were people who were elderly, who were disabled. But in the 1960s, and it seems that it happened right around the time of Women's Lib, people were able to collect welfare benefits who also didn't have the age issue, and they didn't have any disability issues. And there was another way for women to kind of take on the role of trying to do it all. That's what Women's Lib really pushed, was do it all. And the fathers got pushed in the background. Children grew up. A lot of kids grew up with a mother, but a lot of kids did not grow up knowing their father or having any sort of positive role model, because fathers were put on the back burners. Women had free daycare. They had their jobs. They had their independence. If they needed the extra money, they could get that welfare that they needed. They didn't need a husband. And that has been one of the biggest things that I missed in all of my other videos, was looking at it from a husband's point of view, from a father's point of view, and how important it is that children have this, not just mothers in their lives, they've got to have the father in the life too. And I know that there are some situations where there are abusive fathers, or there's just things going on that aren't good for the children, and I get that. But I'm generally speaking that this is what happened. So now further down the road, so we've got this whole mentality going on where women can do it all and they don't need their husband, kids don't need their dads. And now we're in the 21st century and we've moved one step further, one that I'm calling the final blow, although I hope that it really isn't. But now we're in a time where men are being blamed for everything. They are looked down upon in schools. They are looked down upon in the media. They are looked down upon in entertainment. I started watching a new series the other day, and within the first 5 minutes of that series, they already had thrown the word mansplaining in there. And then about 15 minutes later, I heard the word patriarchy and I heard the word patriarchal, so as an adjective. But they were really pushing the idea that men are bad, toxic masculinity, and this is what children are growing up with nowadays, and this is what men are hearing. And this is affecting fatherhood. How many commercials have you seen where they are talking about toxic masculinity and they are making it look like the male side of the humans? That doesn't sound right at all, but they're making it look like males are bad, and that everything that they do instinctively is bad, and they are trying to groom out of them those aspects that society today looks at as being undesirable. But the very aspects that they are trying to groom out of these men nowadays are often the things that children need in a father. They need a father who is strong. They need a father who is not afraid to make decisions for his family. They need a father who is willing to stand up to people when they are doing or saying something wrong. And unfortunately, that's not what society wants of men. Society wants men to take a step back. They want men who are emasculated. And unfortunately, this is happening in schools too. So you have these children hearing all of these bad things about men. They are starting to have these sorts of feelings often about their own fathers. You can just go on TikTok and see how girls especially talk about their dads all the time, how negatively they talk about their dads, because this is all that they're hearing. And unfortunately, yes, they are hearing these things in school. And then moving on to the boys. So the boys, all they have coming at them is how horrible they're going to be when they're older. Not only is that going to affect their relationship with their father, it is going to affect their own ability to be fathers when they are older, because they are going to go into it unprepared, and they're going to not be afraid to, they're going to be not able to be the parent that their child needs, the father that their child needs, I can't talk today, out of fear. Because they don't want to offend people. They don't want to be looked at as someone who has toxic masculinity. They don't want to be accused of mansplaining or all of these other horrible accusations that fathers and men have thrown at them nowadays. And yes, they are not going to be able to be the father that children need. And we can see the effect of what this dismantling of the family has done to society. If you take a look at, we'll just say from the 1950s, earlier, society was not the way that it was nowadays. It seems that in the 1960s, we kind of hit this time period where everything just started to go down. Morality started to go down. Crime went up. Delinquency went up. And all of these things really were centered around women's lib. Now, yeah, so this whole thing started way back at compulsory schooling, when that was when, the family originally started to get separated. But then once women's lib happened and women started to have this notion that they didn't need a husband and their kids didn't need fathers, that was really when we started spiraling down to where we're at today. And it's about time that people start to realize it. That's all that I have for you today. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave one over on Instagram or possibly here, because lately I've had comments, but I usually don't. And if you like my work and would like to check out my Patreon page, I will leave a link in the description box for that as well. And I hope you have a great day.